Welcome back to another Weaver video. In this video I'm going to use this is about 7-8 ounce veg tan black, and I'm going to use it to make a sheath for my Leatherman Surge. And the most important thing is to create a mold or a jig. I guess you could say this is more like a mold, and I'm making the part that's going to be stretched over or around the Leatherman with the leather in between. And you see I just traced it on the bandsaw, and I'm just cutting it out gently. I am using a bandsaw blade. It's 14 TPI. It's 1/8 inch thick. And I realized that the Leatherman stuck up above the plywood just a little bit. So it's a little bit fat. I guess it's like 7/8 of an inch thick, because that was 3/4 inch plywood. And so I put this little piece of plastic, which is about another 1/4 of an inch, which was more than I needed, but it was perfect. And I just CA glued these together. It's just a moment, just a means to an end. And then I used a router there. I actually flush cut it off camera, but then I just used that to put a little round over on it. If I left that sharp, I was afraid it was going to stretch and scratch the leather. So I gave it a round over, and then I sanded it off camera with like a 600 grit. And I'm not really sure exactly what this is going to look like. I just know that I need plenty to stretch. Soak it in the water for probably about 10 minutes. And then pull it out. And this is a really heavy-duty vise that I have on a very heavy stand, so I could wrestle around and it's not going to slide on me. And you see, I just wanted to make sure that the knife was positioned over the hole. And with the strength of that vise and these clamps, there was hardly any resistance. I couldn't have pushed it in without the clamps, but with the clamp and the vise, the resistance was non-existent. It forced it right into position. Kicking Junior off the table there. And this is the next day. And you could see how the leather formed. Still a little bit damp, but you see it picked up a little bit of the shape of the actual tool itself. That's just some dirt from the plywood. Now I'm just checking how the back's going to fit on there. I know I wanted this leaning forward look, and I sketched a little bit, and off camera I ended up using some rulers just to kind of make my line straight. And I'm just rough cutting it. I'm giving myself more than I need. Using the bandsaw, like I said, it's a 14 tooth per inch, 1/8 inch thick blade. You could see where I didn't really come up to all the lines right there. And I just love my PVA glue. I just glue it in place. I let it dry for a couple of hours. And this is where the mold comes in handy again, because I could just use it to put even pressure on the overlapping parts. And now it's a couple hours later, and I'm just using my calipers to set a parallel line. And I'm punching into my cutting mat, which was a bad idea. I should really be cutting into my polypropylene little flat. You'll see it in a minute. And I'm using 3-prong forks and 2-prong forks to make the curve. So the 3-prong forks for the straights, and then the curves I use the 2-prong forks. And every time I'm laying one of the prongs into the previous punch so that my spacing stays good. And there's that piece of plastic that I'm cutting my holes on. As you see with the white edge, it's actually a piece of King color core. It's sign making plastic. You would see through the black into the white, and it's a permanent color. And you'll notice I'm going to slice. I don't have a belting hole punch. I'm sure it's something that I can get easily from Weaver, but I didn't have one handy. So I popped my 2 holes, and then I'm connecting them like the little dumbbell look right there. And that's because I don't think I would ever tangentially be able to cut into the hole and come out perfectly. I'm not that good with the razor blade, so I just make sure I just make the dog bone or the dumbbell looking thing, and that works just as well. And now I'm punching the holes on the exterior perimeter here. You watch me punch the holes around the knife itself. And you'll notice I hadn't cut the pocket for the knife. I was just thinking on it. I didn't need to rush into cutting it. I knew I wanted to put stitching all the way around everything, so I wanted it to be in its most rigid form when I was working with the hole for the tool because I wanted to know that it was going to come in and out and not change after I sewed it or stitched it. And now I'm being more cautious. I'm sewing, band sewing right at the edge of the stitch. And I'm just hand stitching this whole thing. I still have a little bit of room around the stitch line there to sand the actual edge, which I'll do a little bit later after I'm done stitching. And this is just a exercise in concentration, making sure you're putting even pressure. I was a little uneven in my stitching on the inside loop, the one you're watching me do, and I got a little bit better after looking at that. You don't want to jump too many loops ahead because you won't be able to tighten it. So you want to do 1, 2, and then tighten it. 1, 2, and then tighten it. If you go too far ahead, you won't be able to, and I learned that the hard way on the middle loop. And you see I'm almost all the way around the outside loop. Just wanted to show you one full one in slow motion. And I was having a hard time pushing that needle through completely with my fingers alone, so I'm using my Leatherman tool to grab and pull it through. And that vise, it's not very tight in that vise because those vise will leave marks on the leather. And I back stitch. I go through the whole, actually I don't necessarily back stitch. I overlap the stitch by about 3 holes and then I just cut it flush. Occasionally I'll tie it, but it's given this, see how this works. So the thread overlaps where I began. And now I'm just using some figurative tools to put a texture on everything between the stitch lines. So it's just a repetitive tapping. It really helps when you cut, punch, or die on top of a steel brick. Now here I'm just going to clean up that edge in relationship to the outer stitch line. And I'm just using my belt sanders. You know, you work with what you got. And now I'm actually going to cut the hole. So you'll see me cut and then I give it a quick try, which is no way it's going to fit. But I know it came out of there, so of course it's going to fit somehow, some way. It's got to figure out what the best relationship of that cut opening hole is to the flexibility of the leather. And then with a Dremel tool, I'm just polishing up that edge, just getting the shape exactly how I want it. Just putting some tough coat on the edge. I did burnish it a little bit off camera and sand it some more. Now you could vaguely see the texturing in the parts between the stitch line. I'm just giving this some tough coat clear. And now I'm burnishing the edge a little bit more. And you can see the sheen that it's going to keep with that tough coat clear. It really brightens it up. And where I'm wearing this, I'm actually wearing this right now on my hip. It certainly does feel like a gun holster, but it's really actually quite comfortable. I thought it was going to be a little too bulky, but I gave it a test run for the last couple of days, and I really do like it. And it's obviously gotten easier to pull that in and out. And pressed against my body, that upper part kind of cuffs it in. So thank you for watching, and thank you, Weaver,